Um, so Craig, thanks for coming. Tell us your story.
Well, I started in this industry 15 years to the day on the 7th of this month, professionally. 15, my first repair facility. And it's been an interesting ride, to say the least. Um, Started out at a tire repair shop. Um, they did tires, alignments, oil changes, it was basic stuff, which was perfect for me at 17. What can I do? You know. So I didn't spend too much time there, maybe about a year, and I was ready to grow. Long before even that. Um, Got out there, worked for a few independents. Um, Slowly thereafter, I started working for GM dealerships. Did not like working for GM at all, or dealerships in general. The overall is a miserable experience. Too much politics. Just not enjoyable at all. For the past 6 years, I've been working fleet, and that's been much better. It's by far been the best job I've had in this industry. Um, Well, and in all realisticness, this industry is the only thing I've ever done for a living. Um, but it changed completely everything around. I would not be in this industry right now if I probably couldn't have gotten out. So take that for what you will. Um,
hmm
so
that's a big deal because one of the biggest concerns that everybody has, and I've seen so many posts across LinkedIn and any social media where somebody is trying to either do hiring or show whatever the case may be. It's technician shortage, technician shortage, technician shortage, and it's a very difficult
yeah,
industry to be in. Um, for a lot of reasons, but there's a lot of good that can come from it. There's like if there wasn't mechanics, the world stops. Like
be
things break,
quite literally.
quite literally. Like it just
Yeah,
stops because stuff breaks. At some
and
stage or another, stuff breaks. So
and on a scary level too. I mean, it's not just John Smith driving his Lexus and his seat stopped working and he needs to fix. It's ambulances, fire engines. This is things I deal with on a daily basis.
hmm
It's life critical. It's catastrophic
right, and you,
if it's
you
not
talk about
there.
things like train failures. You get a train car
Yeah,
that fails. You got a 300 car train pile up in the middle of
yeah,
nowhere that's got oil everywhere and all it contaminates environments and it stops. Like when you're talking about trains and boats and ships not being able to run or having breakage and then just being out drifting to sea. If I recall something, I think I saw in LinkedIn a while back where there was a container ship that caught fire and they couldn't put it out. So the crew basically abandoned ship, and this ship full of it was like VWs and Audis and Porsches just drifting in the sea.
it sunk. Yeah, that was early, very early this year, I think.
Yeah, it's like that's not a little bit of money. That's not even a lot of money. That is nearly a number that you can't fathom the amount
Absolutely.
of damage. And they have mechanics on board and they have fire equipment on board. There's only so much you can do in those circumstances. And even then they've got mechanics on board.
Yeah,
So
and
when you get breakage like that, it's bad. It's very bad.
yeah, and that happened in the peak of the car crisis. So just trying to be able to get cars. There were a lot of them were electric, from what I understand. So all that material waste, it's 12,000 feet at the bottom of the ocean now. You never get back.
Exactly. That's crazy. So you've been in fleet for the last 6 years and you're working on essential services and more importantly emergency services. Um, and you made mention that, if it wasn't for fleet, you'd probably be out of the trade. So it stands to reason that you came to a point where you wanted to be a mechanic. You started being a mechanic. So what was that first year like? And then we need to find out why it is that between that first year where you were gung ho, or theoretically here, we're going to find out in a minute, but you were
Right.
gung ho, you finished you finished that up and you continued, but you got to a point around the 8-9 year mark and went, "Ugh."
hmm Well, the first, well, and to be clear, I was never an apprentice anywhere. This was a kind of a different time. It was right before the financial crisis. You know, I was lucky to have a job most of that time.
Mm-hmm.
There was not a lot of work. This right after that first year, I should say. But that first year, it was sink or swim. Is either you're going to be successful here or you're not. It's just the way it is. Um, it was kind of around that time where I think the interest really started dropping off for a lot of young people. I didn't want to. I think that's where it started, in my opinion. People were starting to steer away from this trade as well as others. But I pushed through it for a while. I had to drive for it, and I still do to a point. But yeah, around that 8 or 9 year mark, um, I was definitely ready to do something else. I was burnt out, and who in this business isn't, at least a little bit at all times. Um, it's a business that struggles to provide paths forward, I guess I would say. Um, you know, you hear all the time about someone who's started at a Ford dealer, 18 out of high school, and they worked there for 40 years. They was a technician the entire time, and that's great if that's what they want to do. But if there's no way to move forward and try new things and, work on maybe bigger things, or maybe you want to do more management, anything like that, this business definitely struggles with promoting people, especially from within. There's just not a whole lot of opportunity.
I think one of the biggest difficulties is that when you get to a point, and we talked about this at the meeting there last week on SDL, and it's what happens when you can fix everything, like 99.9% of the things that come through the door as a mechanic. It doesn't matter whether you're at a dealer for cars or you're fixing forklifts or you're fixing dump trucks at a coal mine. 99% of the time, after 15, 20 years, you know exactly what's wrong with it. Like there's very few things that you've seen differ from a rear axle seems to be locking up on a Chevy dually, and I just putting this out there, but a Chevy dually, say 99% of the time, pinion bearings let go, and it's a wash, and you don't need to see the truck. You don't care how many miles are on it. You don't care what state it's from or what country it's from. Chevy dually 2015 needs a pinion bearing. And in all likelihood, this is how I repair it because I know exactly where everything is, what the bolts are, what the nuts are, what tools to use, where the tools are in my toolbox, and so on and so forth. So it becomes like a monotonous line style kind of work. And this is where it gets interesting to some degree, because I did some research earlier on in May and early parts of June. And there was lots of, again, continuous this technician shortage. And there is, at least in the States, there's lots of pull for technicians to go into line work. And you see them as just basic maintenance, but it's working on a literal line. So fixing conveyor belts and fixing maintenance things in a big facility where they're making product and there's making thousands of them per hour. And that thousands per hour needs to be working all of the time, or only needs to be down during the scheduled times because of product, whatever. So that costs them hundreds of thousands of dollars if it goes down when they're in production. So when you have a skilled mechanic come into there whose mindset is preventative maintenance, okay, we're on shutdown on Thursday this week, we're down for 8 hours, everything's shut, everything's to be out of our way. These are the things that we need to prepare for, so that during that 8 hours, these are the 500 things that we got to get done. And the mentality is, I got to get that done during that time because we can't be down.
Right.
They're being paid $45, $50 an hour. Some of them as low as $32 an hour. Straight time. They've got retirements. They've got 401ks. They've got paid time off in excess of the normal 2 weeks. If you get paid time off somewhere in the States, we get paid time off in Canada here, but it's a little bit different. But the benefits and the perks and the money is so much more, and it requires less mental function. To be completely honest, from what I've heard description of, now I don't know personally, but it requires less mental function that we do day-to-day learning as a mechanic to stay in this trade, especially in a dealership when you've got brand new product coming every 9 months. So why is it that we go back into a statement where like you've had where you get bored? Well, at least if it becomes line work, you're talking about, okay, you're taking an hour, it pays an hour, and I'm now doing it at 0.8. Where's the incentive me to do it in 0.7? Making an extra $3 is not an incentive at that point when you've been doing it for 15 years. But if there's an incentive to make that extra, okay, so where's that scaled? Okay, still not the same money. Because when you can walk out the door at $30 an hour and you go down the street to Blue Oak's production line and they're paying $40 an hour straight time. You walk in at 8 o'clock, you walk out at 5 o'clock, no stress, no tools, no further buying, no further education, no worry or responsibility outside of that 8 to 5. So you don't have to finish a customer's car by 5 o'clock. You don't have to start at a certain time, at certain specific times. Like, can you come in an hour earlier because John's minivan is coming in at 7 o'clock and he's got to run flat and we need to fix the tire and get it out by 8 o'clock because he's got to go to work. You don't have any of that. So the incentive right now doesn't seem to be there, save for few. There are a few shops, and I've started to find some leaders in automotive that are really trying to push the boundaries of what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable, and ways to find out more ways to do better business for technicians. But in your circumstance, I want out, right? I want out. So there wasn't an incentive for you at the time, and then you found Fleet. So that first year was hard. The next 7 or 8 years was hard. Then you found Fleet. What changed when you went to Fleet?
Hourly pay is a big thing. To this day, I still work flat rate, at least in my mind, flat rate. I watch the time I take to do things. I know what I can push and what I need to get done quickly. I guess when I say what I know I can push, like if I need to take something I can. I can also explain why it took the time that it did. I'm never worried about my paycheck, which is a good thing. Well, everybody's got to worry about the paycheck, but I guess what I'm saying is I'm never worried, are they going to short me 5 hours for this week because they're not happy with something? Because base shops do it all the time. They straight up steal from technicians. You know, the 5 hours that you get stolen from you for something is not worth going to court over. Let's be honest. If that happens and you don't like it, the easiest thing is just to move. But I don't worry about that there, which is great.
So can we jump on that just a little bit?
Absolutely.
So you've been now. I genuinely never got shorted time on any of my paychecks as a flat rate tech, and even now as a straight time tech, I don't get shorted time. It's straight time.
Mm-hmm.
Hold on a second. Mm-hmm. So I never got shorted I've never been shorted as a straight time tech, and I don't ever remember being shorted as a flat rate tech, and I don't know of anybody else being shorted as a flat rate tech, save for warranty. So anytime where we would claim for, let's throw it out here, Jeep Grand Cherokee oil cooler repair paid 6.5 hours. We at the beginning of all of those repairs, it paid 10, so we charged out 10. Mm-hmm. At the early stages, that's what it was, and then you continue, and then they updated stuff and they didn't tell us. So afterwards, when the warranty admin put through all of the claims and so on and so forth, and it came back 7, that's the only times that I can think of being shorted. Oh, are you talking about customer pay being shorted? Are you talking about?
Yeah, customer pay. It's and it hasn't happened to me dozens of times. Thankfully, that would be terrible. But yeah, there's been when I was in some of the independent shops, there was a number of times where maybe we did brakes on a car. I told them not to put X brand pads on it because they always make noise. They put the cheapest pads they can find on this Mercedes, and 2 months it's back and the customer's not happy that the brakes are making noise. And I've done nothing wrong. It's got brand new pads, everything's clean. But let's face the facts, it's making noise and they're not happy. So they need to come off, and new pads at least need to go on. And, you know, things like that. That those were things that happened, and then you don't get paid for any of it. So clearly, it's not my fault. We know that it's not necessarily management or parts distribution's fault. It's just here we are. We have this issue. You know, and I can remember a handful of times doing like, I don't know, like, you know, you fix a check engine light, and then a month later they get an airbag light, and some of your customers don't understand those are totally different systems with two totally different computers operating them, and all they see is light on the dash, and that's why they're not happy. So you know, and
so it really sounds like you're having a pretty gnarly case of SIDSA, and you're having a case where the shop that you were at the time were any kind of a warranty repair, because it's an independent, any kind of warranty repair on any of the work, whether it was your fault or not. And in the given example is brakes, your fault or not, you're not being paid for the time you put in. So
right,
the customer's getting a brand new set of brakes, but you're not being paid for your labor. And whether the shop's getting paid or not is irrelevant. You're not getting paid for the time that you spent.
right, exactly.
So these are the kinds of conversations that we need to have at length, as to figure out how do we circumvent these scenarios where, you know, the shop is trying to show goodwill towards the customer. And as a person who's been both behind the desk and behind the bench, it's really difficult. But as a leader in that business, you've got a customer that's coming back, and you know, they've spent $600 on a set of brakes, pads, rotors, clean everything up, and they're not happy. Okay, well, it's the shop's purse that comes out of, not the technician's purse, especially if he's flat rate, because it doesn't matter what the circumstances are, unless the tech screwed something up, it still shouldn't be necessarily coming out of his pocket, or her pocket for that matter, because they have to do the repair. Now, in the circumstance of a comeback, let's say you put the pad on backwards, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah,
you're going to be doing the repair for free.
Yeah,
at least your labor time for free. That's just an integrity thing. It's like, I fucked up, so
yeah.
I'm going to do something like that. But when there's clearly nothing that you've done as a technician, clearly that there's nothing done that you've done as a technician, and you replace with all the same stuff, or better yet, a better set of pads and rotors, there's no reason why you shouldn't be paid for your time, or at least have some kind of compensation, because flat rate's not necessarily the greatest system. It's not a bad system. It's just not a great system either.
Exactly.
There's got to be a way, and this is where a lack of communication is rampant across our industry. We've got leaders who assume that we're not human, that we're machines, that we never make a mistake. But when we do, we're the ones paying for it. That's not right. That's not right. You have shop liability. The shop is a shop. Shop pays. The shop makes $100 an hour, $120 an hour, $150 an hour. You don't. Ergo, you also don't pay for the back end, the good, the bad, the otherwise, because they're getting all the benefits. It shouldn't be you paying for the drawbacks. So that's awful to hear. Like, that's really awful to hear that you've been made to effectively pay in those circumstances for those repairs. And I'm sure there's going to be more that I come across as I have more conversations with folks like yourself that have had to pay for like that. And that's not right. That's not right. Not right at all. So in that circumstance, those were the reasons why you got a flat rate and why you got into fleet, because you have a repair to do. It doesn't really, the customer is, Mississippi, or the customer is Florida State, or the customer is, Ontario Police Department. It needs to be fixed. It needs to be fixed right, and it can't be down. Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's where your lack of stress comes into play, because you go to the vehicle, there's something wrong with it, you fix it, it goes out the door. Right?
Yeah, it's a kind of stress. We're not so much worried about our paychecks, but we do need to get things fixed as quickly as possible. And that's where I try to keep the flat rate mentality. alive and well to try to keep myself as efficient as possible, to keep management happy. Just in general, you try to put what I do, I try to put in perspective, what I just, repair is going to go out and do a very important job. It may save someone's life. You don't know. It's, there's pieces of equipment do things, we don't see.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important to do the best you can as fast as you can.
Awesome. And that mentality is what allows us to stay efficient, because we're constantly learning. We're constantly, as long as you as a mechanic, doesn't matter where you are, whether you work in straight time or not, if you can think about the repairs like, okay, what do I need to do and how can I do it efficiently so that we can get this out the door as fast as possible? But then the next question is, if you're thinking like you're flat rate while you're in a straight time shop, are you putting undue stress on yourself?
No, because you're going to get it either way. If I'm not moving fast enough, the powers that be reasonably unhappy. Especially
Is that something that's been communicated to you directly? As in, do you have a benchmark? Like do you have a flat rate system inside the shop, even though you're paid straight time? Do you have a flat rate system inside the shop saying, this ambulance that you have to do an electrical repair on, Lord knows it's probably straight time, but if there's a certain criteria of time, like if it's in the shop for 3 days, are they going to get unhappy? And there's a time posted somewhere, or a piece of communication that say ambulances can't be in the shop for 3 days, or how is that communicated to you specifically?
No, see, it's really not like that. Especially I'm considered a lead technician. So it's less so. It's more so if you can explain why it's taking what it's taking, everything's fine. It's pretty much. I don't want to say it's a blank check. It's not a blank check, but it needs to be explained. There needs to be a reason. If you have an intermittent electrical issue on that ambulance, and you're using, your experience, and you've done certain things. If I can explain to someone what I've done, explain to them why I don't have an answer, then okay, it is what it is. We just have to keep going until we have that answer. Or maybe look at other routes, research other issues. That's totally, on the table as well. But no, it's not so much of this just can't happen regardless, because it's not how the world works. Things take certain amounts of time, sometimes unknown amounts of time.
And one of the things that keep coming back to communication. Are you and in the shop, do you have electronic work orders? Do you have written work orders? Is it all verbal? How does it work in your shop?
It's a little bit of both. I have a tablet person. We all have tablets that shows everything, but it's still written up by hand. The operator will write that up by hand, and I get a copy of it as well.
And then you fill out. Do you do a line by line? For example, we're doing an electrical repair on an ambulance, so no main lights on ambulance. Confirm. Verify battery. Perform battery tests. Pass. Printout attached. Check switch. Re switch. Check for power and ground at switch. Good. Are you writing that kind of detail out per work order on the tablet, or are you writing that amount of work on the written copy that the operator gives you, or are you communicating that verbally?
I do it all on the tablet personally. I like to type.
Okay.
I have terrible handwriting, so it's better for them to see that anyway. And coming from the dealers, I do have the experience with, you need to write up everything very clearly for, for warranty, so you can get paid. It's the same thing. My boss explains to us all the time, the notes are critical, and I agree with him completely. Because again, it all comes back to getting paid, or more so than myself getting paid, is everything being explained. As long as you can explain everything is great.
So
because
on stuff that you've worked on, let's say you've worked on somebody, let's say it's a comeback, and the person who did the work in the first place may not be there anymore, or may be on holidays, or whatever the case may be. When you've seen those work orders, because we all have, there are some folks who are explaining it clearly, like you're saying that you do on your work orders, and there are those that still don't. Whether they come from the dealership world or not, there are some that still don't.
mm,
And I think one of the difficulties is everybody has a different opinion as to what clearly is. Check power and ground, good. Check switch, good. Check lights, bad. And realistically speaking, do you have power battery? Yes. Do you have power at switch? Yes. Do you have power at lights? Yes. Light faulty. That's clear. That as clear as enough that you can communicate that to a customer. So you know that there's power everywhere. The light should be coming on. It isn't. Light dead. But realistically speaking, is that enough detail? Should that be enough detail? Should you, because you're theoretically, let's say it doesn't fix it, or it doesn't fix it for long, and it's got to go at the door. You fix it, it goes out, you go on holidays next week, it comes back, the light stopped working again. Well, what if there's 3 junction blocks between the switch and the lights, and you didn't check power at each junction block, but they find out after 5 or 6 hours later of electrical testing, because they got no lights, they got let's say they got bad pin tension at junction 3. Do you need to go into detail to that much detail? Must you go into that much detail every time? That's a different question.
I would prefer to, and to add on to that, we have power and ground at X light.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that unloaded, or is that a circuit loaded when you check that?
Mm-hmm.
Did you take a 2.5 amp or 5 amp bulb maybe and tie it in to see if it can carry the load of that circuit? That's another thing, not everybody understands. Some people do, some people don't. Not everyone's the same technician, not everyone understands electrical as well. And not compared to me, be clear on that. You know what I'm talking about. But those are things, hey, we had a problem with that junction block. Oh, well, it's because it's full of corrosion. So yeah, when that connector's disconnected, yeah, it's got 12 volts in there. As soon as you plug it into the light to try to turn the light on, it shoots right down to 4 volts. Yeah, that's why we don't have a light.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, our light's not our problem.
Mm-hmm. So, and this is where what I want technicians across the globe to understand is that detailed notes, like really detailed notes, help everybody. Because at the end of the day, it's not your job as a technician to explain to the customer why it is that they need what they need. It's the service advisor's job, or the service manager's job, or whoever it is that is doing the communication between you and the customer. Because not everybody is an owner operator in a small shop down the street where they literally, where customer comes in, literally drives into the garage. Hey, Bob. Hey, Phil. How you doing? What are we doing today? We're doing an oil change. Okay, I'll get your oil change done. Bob, where you go? Go grab a coffee. And there's coffee in the waiting room. Just go there. I'll be 20 minutes and I'll get you all done. Not everybody's like that. There's lots and lots of those out there. And they got to figure out a way to communicate to their customer in that kind of detail whether they understand. And we should all be, as mechanics, I think we should all be able to do that, but not everybody's capable. And do I expect technicians everywhere to do that? No. Because realistically speaking, most of us work in a shop where there's 3, 10, 30 of us, and they've got writers or they've got a service manager to communicate to the customers, because that's just efficient ways to do things. As long as it's clearly, eloquently, and well documented on the work order, that's where our communication needs to stop. But if it's not clearly and effectively communicated on the work order, we're not doing our job, I don't think.
No, I agree. And like I would tie that into intermittent issues as well. It's very common in this industry, even from an OEM standpoint. If you can't find X problem, replace X part, see what happens.
And that's that's an epidemic on its own, right? That's a complete epidemic on its own. When you've got folks, and I've seen it. I have seen it. I've seen it in spades at dealers where you got a car come in and you got 7 complaints on a work order, all customer concern, all under 10,000 kilometers or 6,000 miles on the car, and they got 7 complaints, and every single one of them is MPF. No problem found. Every single one. And you've got 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour into this car, trying to make sure that this customer is getting back a good product when they're done, that they can somewhat resolve that you've made the attempt. But where are you going to charge? Like less than 10,000 kilometers? Hey, less than 50,000 kilometers, less than 35,000 miles. Who are you going to charge? You going to charge the customer? If they heard something on the highway and something goes ding, and they're driving along, and their heart's doing one of these in their chest, you want them to feel safe in that car out there.
Mm-hmm.
The last thing you want to do, especially a low mileage car, is charge them something. Should we? Yes. Do we want to? No. Are you going to have a bad CSI score afterwards or have a bad customer experience afterwards if you do? Absolutely. And that's the conundrum. And that is where it gets put on to the service manager or the fixed ops manager. They need to decide how that goes. But even as a flat rate tech, should you be eating that time? No. You shouldn't be worried about getting paid to do the job right. And that's where we're coming back full circle. The reason why you got out of being at a dealership, why you got out of being at a dealership, is because you weren't being taken care of. Your needs, your employment, your employee experience wasn't being taken care of to your needs. And I think once you got into fleet and you realize straight time, effective repair, keep my knowledge up, keep my tools up, watch my productivity, communicate clearly, I get paid. That's something that needs to maybe filter into the rest. And that's for you. Would that be your happy advice? Is not necessarily grass is greener, but find a fit?
I think, well, see, I wanted to touch on what you said a little bit about whether we charge something for that, what we did. In my opinion, yeah, absolutely. I do not agree. I never have agreed with the blanket idea this industry has, is that an hour covers everything every time for whatever someone comes in for. The hour should just be the first preliminary. Okay, we get the car, test drive it, we verify a problem's there, we verify it's not there, scan every single control module on that vehicle and a truck, whether we're working on a car or a truck. Look for TSBs. Do cover all those bases. It's kind of like when you go to the doctor and you might have a problem with your ear. You can't hear somebody check your heart. You might think, why would they do that? But they check everything. I don't see why automotive should be any different. That's on me. And then, okay, so we get through all that. We can't find, or say we find a bulletin on some, but we didn't verify it's there. I should be able to communicate with service advisor or service manager. Hey, this is the problem. We didn't duplicate it. This bulletin here that is a reflash is basically, we know it's going to fix it. We're 90% sure, but we don't know. That decision needs to come on their end. Or do you want us to keep it and we keep playing with it until we verify that the concern's there? We really should do that. But, that customer may be waiting at service level somewhere. It may take 5 minutes to update that computer.
And you know what? It doesn't matter what shop you work for, you're going to have that difficulty. You might have a waiting customer, but it's their car, it's their money. They need to decide what to do. And as a shop owner or a shop service manager, being able to decide, it should be up to them to decide also, okay, we need to communicate with the customer. This is what we found. This is what we haven't found. This is what we can duplicate. This is what we can, what are we going to do? And put that in the customer's court to figure out what to do next. And all of that should be effectively communicated. And it comes back to, do you charge them or not? And that's not, again, that shouldn't be anywhere close to being on a mechanic's mind, ever. You should never worry about your paycheck. Never, ever worry about your paycheck. because your only focus is the car. Just and recent conversation is, don't worry about the money, don't worry about the time, don't worry about anything else. Just fix the car. And if you can't find a problem, you can't fix the car. And that's another kind of conundrum onto what you're talking about. If you can't find the problem, you think a flash could fix it. But if you haven't duplicated the problem, how do you know to test for success afterwards?
Mm-hmm.
That's a fundamental problem. And that where you start throwing the darts at the dartboard of repair, right?
Mm-hmm.
90% of the time, it's going to hit that center dot every time, right? But 10% of the time, you're going to do that repair, maybe charge customer money, maybe charge warranty. But if you haven't duplicated the repair, how can you confirm it's done? But the flip side is, if the flash is there and you don't do it because you haven't duplicated, that also sets a precedent for the customer. It's like, well, if you tell me that this flash is present, why didn't you just do it anyway? Especially if it's a warranty. Well, we couldn't confirm it. Where do you go? Where do you go? Yeah. Right?
That's one of the infinite problems of this stuff.
Oh, so we've got through, where you've come up in the last 15 years, what you're doing now, some of the difficulties. We've got some good warranty banter in there. We've got why you're doing what you're doing now, and that it was a fleeting edge, fleeting edge, that you are still in this, still in the trade. One of the things that again, back to this, what would you say that you've either learned or you just seemingly do every day that makes you happy to be a mechanic, or that you do specifically because it makes you happy to be a mechanic?
That's a tough question. I think probably I would say probably one of the better things about it is the day goes by so quick. When I clock in first thing in the morning, before I know it's the end of the day. I'm sure we've all had at least one of those jobs where we're watching the clock all day and it just can't finish fast enough. Mm-hmm. That's something I do really enjoy. I try to work at a very fast pace as much as I can. It's somewhat out of the need too, because there's always so much work to do. But it kind of goes. I remember seeing once one of those motivational posters, and it kind of went and showed, like, here's your average life of 80 years, and you're going to spend 60 to 65 of them working. Make sure you're doing something that you can at least tolerate. So I guess that's a big thing for me. So, because I think that's very true.
Are you in a position where the day goes fast, which makes you happy because then you get to go home to your family, get to do whatever you want to do? Or are you happy because you've got something that you tolerate or something that you really enjoy?
Oh, no, I enjoy it to a point. I kind of like, working on and select a few things. Especially what I do, I work on a little bit of everything, but what we do work on, I feel like I know pretty well. Mm-hmm. It's not uncommon for me to see a repair order come in, and I can literally spend 5 minutes with the vehicle, whether it's a car or it's a heavy truck. I know what's wrong with it already. It might just be going out there, opening the hood and look at something, and I've got the part numbers written down in my book, and I get what I need and I fix it. So I guess a little bit of there's enjoyment in just trying to master everything you can. If that makes any kind of sense.
It does.
That's the way I see it.
It's the challenge. And, there's, in the dealership world, it's constantly evolving. So every 6 to 9, 12 months, there's a new product of some description. Even if it's a year-over-year, like almost no changes, or a 3-year refresh, there's subtle differences between them that you either need to learn or you need to change your approach, or maybe there's an extra part to take off, or maybe the bearing style is a little different, or maybe the clutch material isn't quite the same in the transmission, or a repair that you used to do over and over and over again. Now there's a workaround where maybe you drill out the valve body and put an extra ball in, or something very, very creative in there that you get to learn. In fleet, it's going to be slightly less changing, I would imagine, because you're going to see the same car probably for 10 or 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
Even the same style of car for 10 or 15 years with little to no changes. Where you're adapting is, it's like, okay, I was doing this in 2 hours. Maybe I can do it in 1.9. And figuring out a way to do that, because that's setting your own benchmark. So for you to measure your own success, you're measuring it against yourself, right? And that's a really big advantage, is if you can get to a point where you're happy measuring your success against yourself, that's a really happy place to be. I think for me personally, that would be an amazing place if we can get a lot of folks out there that are turning wrenches every day. If we can get them to understand that you're not turning a wrench against the guy or trying to beat the guy next to you, or the guy across from you, or the fact that, Bob down the end of the shop gets all the transmissions and makes 70 hours a paycheck because he does all the transmissions and you don't get to do any, or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe the transmission that you did 3 months ago, maybe you get another one in today and it took you 8 hours then. What if you did it in 7 today?
Yeah.
Oh, well, Bob's just going to get him anyway. It's like, what if you do it in 7 hours and the service manager goes, hey, you just beat your last time. Do you want to do more transmissions? It's like, yeah, I love them. Give me more.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't show the aptitude, or more specifically, the confidence and ambition to do that, to measure your success based on your own success, you're not going to do much. You're just going to be doing the same boring stuff over and over again. And that becomes even more of a challenge, because I'm not getting paid more. I'm not making any more money. I'm doing something I don't really enjoy doing. I'm not challenged. And to know that there is better for yourself by improving yourself is another big hurdle, which sounds like you've already done. You found something that you enjoy doing. You challenge yourself every day, which makes you happy, and you get to go home at the end of the day and get to do it again tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, I would agree. And kind of what you just said there, that's something I think shops need to really embrace as well, is everybody's got a niche with something. There's always something that somebody's better with than everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
I can think of one of my coworkers I work with. He can take apart a seat and the cushions and the covers and put them back together faster and better than anyone I know. Me, I can't stand that kind of stuff. I'll sit there, and I guess maybe because I'm too OCD with it, but I can never get it the way I want it. And if someone enjoys that kind of thing, why would you not give them that work as much as you can? Because it makes them happy. Get the job gets done faster.
Upholstery techs are so rare. They're so rare, because everybody's like, oh, I want to do engines, or oh, I'm really good at driveline and more specifically diffs, or I'm really good at transmissions and diagnosing transmissions and things like that. But people who can do upholstery work, I don't think it actually requires more intellectual knowledge. I think upholstery requires a certain finesse that the rest of the car doesn't require. You need finesse to do engines. You need to be able to feel torque. When you're doing engines and you're being very careful with it, doing it properly and precisely, you have to have a certain feel to it. But you have to have even more of a feel and be clean when you're doing upholstery work, because all it takes is one schmear on a brand new white leather seat and you're doing it all over again with a new seat. So that in itself, finding your niche in this business could be your next step. But it requires leadership to understand that you want to find that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as a technician, I've seen lots of folks say, I really I want to get better at this, or I want to go do this course, or I want to go do this course. But I know there's a lot of folks out there that don't. They just don't. I gotta, I gotta get my level 1. Yeah. Now you need to get your level 2 in order to do warranty work of any kind. You get all of your level 1s, all of your level 2s in the dealership so that you can do warranty work. Really? Can't I just fix a car?
Mm.
If you take 2 hours to fix something that would take you 0.3 because you did the training, yes. Yes, you need to do the training because that might save you an hour and a half. And what it means that our customer gets the car faster. We do more cars because you're now working on 2 or 3 other cars in that time frame as opposed to one. It helps everybody. Training is good for everybody. Oh, okay. Why you want me to do level 3 now? Well, you got all your level 2s done. Do I need to do it for warranty? No, not necessarily. Not if you don't want to do the warranty work on them. It's like, no, I'll just stay here at level 2. I've seen it. I've heard it. I've had as a tech, I've seen it happen on the floor. As a person who's been behind the desk, I've had texts like, why do I need to do training? You gonna pay me for it? Well, yeah, I'll pay you your time for it. It's like how much you pay me for it? It's like, well, it's an 8-hour course. Oh, you're gonna pay me 8 hours? Yeah, you gotta pass it. What happens if I don't pass it? That's the goal. It's like the car. If you don't fix the car, you don't get paid. Like if it comes back, you're not gonna get paid. Like, oh, I don't really want to do it then. So there's an aspect of this that the mentality we really need. I think as an industry, we need to understand that we need to lift. Rising tide lifts all shifts, including the ones that are nearly sinking. And we need to understand that we need to get those people who are sinking, we need to bail them out. Because they need to understand that the whole industry needs to come up. And even if it's just 1% across the board, and then 1% across the board, I think we can do that. And as a whole, we need to do that, I think, because we don't have apprentices coming in. We don't have young people coming into the industry in the droves that we used to, which is showing because we've got all kinds of folks. You got boomers and you got Gen X retiring or retired at a rate faster than we can fill it on the other end. The need is still there. And in fact, it's more so than it's ever been. And like you said yourself, in 2007, 2008, especially 2008, there wasn't the incentive back then. And it's kind of slowly waned. So we need to get young people in. If we can't get young people in because they see this mentality of us coming home from work and, you know, I'm a dad at 38. I got an 8-year-old. In 7 years, 8 years, my son's going to be 16. He should be capable of going into the trades. Well, that means 8 years from now, I want to have the industry in a place where I would be happy to have my son come in. Happy to have him, right?
Yeah, you want to leave it better than when you got there.
Exactly.
Which we as an industry have not done a good job with. You know, we haven't incentivized progress and education and comprehension and training of new technologies. And let's face it, it's one of the cold hard facts of this industry is things that make money are tires, brake jobs, actual repairs with labor on it. And that's why we have some of these issues with diagnosing these days, because no one's incentivized to do those things. And why would you want to be if you're going to make less money doing that? I mean, it's just basic economics.
Yeah, if you want to make money, you got to do the stuff that's boring. And when you do the stuff that's boring, you don't really want to do it anymore. If you don't really want to do it anymore, you leave the trade.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we as an industry, and I think and that's why as a tech, speaking to techs like yourself, it's like we need to change the industry. We need to lift the industry so that we can get more folks in it. And I think the opportunity for people to understand that, like yourself, you figured out a way that makes you happy. You are happy in this industry, fundamentally, purely and simply. And it's through your ability to measure your success based on your own success. You have found something that makes you happy. It challenges you every day. You get paid well for what you're doing. Could you get paid better? Of course. Always. Very few are ever paid as paid their value. But you're paid You've got a measure of happiness every day, and you're turning a wrench. And I think getting young people to understand that's a thing is a most resounding thing that we can do from the top of every mountain and we possibly can. Yeah. Ask away.
And what I was going to add on to that, I mean, this is kind of an opinion of my own, but I think for the longest time, this trade thrived on getting people in it because they like performance. You know, I liked cars as a kid. I liked the tuner culture of the 2000s. You know what I mean? Those are all kind of little things that made me think, okay, maybe this makes sense for me because I was not a good student in school. So I think a lot of these kids coming into this trade, they don't care about that kind of stuff anymore. It's the generation. They just don't. I mean, even the young kids that I know of that are working in it, they're not, I don't want to say they're in it just for the heck of it, but I guess maybe some of them thought it would be easier than it is. And maybe
well, it's definitely not easy anymore. And it's definitely not easy from a tuner coaster standpoint. In 1999 and 2000, you put an intake, you put exhaust on the car, front to back, you lower it, you put some wheels on it, and as long as you weren't stupid, everybody leave you alone. Now, driving out of my driveway, the rear springs on my 23-year-old BMW are completely smushed, so the back end looks like it's slammed. Of course, it's an old BMW, and it's stick, so they know that it's stick, and you can see him. I've been pulled over twice because they think my car's too low. And it's only because the front springs are almost completely sagged, but the rear springs are like, I hit bump stops on a regular basis. Because I'm so overwhelmed with stuff to fix at home that the coilovers that I have in the garage to put on to make it low haven't been installed yet. So I've been pulled over twice because my car is too low. But it's simply because the springs are sagged and I'm in a car that's a tuner car because it's an old BMW. So the concept is kids, going back to when I was 16, 17, 18, modifying stuff. I got away with all kinds of stuff. I got left alone. Now, like, the car's stock, completely stock, and I get pulled over because they think it's modified. So that in itself, like, there's a lot of really quite possibly ignorant people out there that has ruined it, and that's where we're at with the industry as a whole. We got a bunch of people who are ignorant and quite possibly rude and not the most intelligent of folks that have ruined it for many. And I think one of the big things is greedy. And that's something to be said in there as well. But adding insult to injury, you've got a flat rate system that isn't necessarily working properly for everybody. And in fact, it's probably not working for the majority of us. You got a straight time system that doesn't really work for the dealership world either. I don't think it works for a lot of places because they don't know how to manage it properly. They don't know how to effectively hold people accountable in a positive way to say, we're paying you straight time, but we still need to manage your expectations of production to work. Like, you still need to produce the same kind of work as you were when you were flat rate, but we're going to pay you a percentage of that flat rate that you maybe expect. So let's put an example. Say you were averaging 90 hours every 2 weeks. Well, we're going to pay you what is effectively 85 hours every 2 weeks without you having to worry about the flat rate portion of it. But you're going to get a straight time salary based on that amount. We still expect you to produce the 90 hours and we're going to hold you accountable to it. Or whatever the case may be, but just different ways to slice to skin the cat, as it were. And being able to manage those expectations effectively and positively, those are things that leaders need to learn. And I think we as mechanics need to learn how to manage the criticisms. Just because we were slow on a car and someone says you were slow on a car, it's not personal. Maybe you need to learn something. Maybe you're having a bad day. It doesn't matter. But having effective communication, and this goes back to the work order. The difference between who thinks this is a detailed work order and who thinks this is a not detailed work order. Those opinions vary. But do they? You yourself said that I think the Did you put a test light to it, or did you actually put a load on the system on that wiring set? Did you put a load on it to see if the wiring was good? Not just if there was power ground there, because there may be one strand of wire that's carrying all 12 volts. But as soon as you load it, not there. Same thing. How detailed do we need to be? And I think fundamentally, what we're doing in detail right now is not effective enough. We need to be more professional. We need to be lifting the entire industry. Well, Craig, do you have any questions? Do you have anything you want to say? Shout out to anybody. Floor's yours.
I do. I have a friend of mine who I met on Facebook years ago. One of the automotive groups, and slowly but surely, and I say this because I hope someone thinks about it. Slowly but surely, he's been kind of venturing away from it. He worked for other people for years, and he opened his own shop. And most of what he does now, when he does repair vehicles, is he does heavy truck road calls. There's big money in it. What that comes with is 2-3 a.m. wake up calls, going out in the middle of the night and freezing cold, and the hot weather, working in really dangerous situations. He likes the money he makes with it, but slowly he's kind of been getting away from that too. He kind of has taken the money he's made off that and invested in other ventures. And he said something recently, and it sticks with me really well. And I hope someone else thinks about it as well. But he did a job recently where he laid gravel down on a dirt driveway. It was just something somebody wanted done. So he went and he did it, and he takes his equipment out and he lays this gravel down. He makes like $2,000 on it, for like 8 hours worth of work. And he says to me, like I said again, I'm sorry for emphasizing on so much. He says to me, "I'm not going to get a call in 2 months because I did this and there's a defective part and I have to do the thing again for free under warranty." He's like, why do we put up with this kind of stress that we're dealing with in this industry right now? And it's true to a point. There's a lot of easy money to be made in the world. And then see, I gotta be careful like way I word that. But there's, well, like we were talking about earlier, there's a lot of easier things to do for more money and less stress. And I think that's utmost what needs to change about this industry the most.
Managing expectations then. So
Yeah.
you're talking about a gentleman who's been in this industry long enough that he goes like questioning why he's working for somebody else, started to do his own thing. And then he was doing his own thing and he was doing really well at it, making very good money at it. But there's still trials and tribulations to go through, even working for himself, making really good money. Doesn't matter what it is, whatever the case may be, he was making really good money and he was happy doing it to a point. And then he got to a point that he came across that something wasn't quite right. So he started doing some other things, and he's still doing heavy truck work, it sounds like, but he's still doing some more stuff on the side. And I think one of the key takeaways from that is he wasn't happy. And it sounds like it sounds like it doesn't matter what he's doing, he's not really 100% happy with what he's doing. And he's trying to find what he's happy doing. And it sounds like he's not just driven, and he's not just driven by money, but he's driven by happiness, and he keeps trying to find something that makes him happy. And I think if we can try and educate those that are in this trade that you can be happy in this trade, and there are other outlets within this trade to be happy. Like if you're in a dealership in a Ford, let's say you're in a Ford store and you're doing nothing but Ford Fiestas all day long, every day, because you happen to be in a portion of the city where it's all commuters. So it's lots and lots of Ford's Fiestas, like 9 out of 10 cars a day you're working on as Fiestas. You could go work in another Ford store if you would like working on Fords, if you want to work on the whole line of Fords. Or if you want to work on larger trucks, Ford has an entire branch of like the F450, F550, and so forth. There are dealerships, even here in Canada, there's a dealership downtown Toronto that does nothing but large Chevys and large Fords. They don't work on anything else, where they're like the cab chassis, but they're the freaking huge trucks that Ford and Chevy make. But they're not the heavy truck coach bits. They're just the really big trucks for Ford and Chevy. There are those avenues. If you want to work on nothing but transmissions, because transmissions make you happy, ask. I'm sure that the service manager is like, oh, you want to do transmissions? You want to do a lot of transmissions? Awesome. You could be the transmission guy. I'm going to send you to all the training. I'm going to make sure you have all the tools. One could only hope that that's all the case. But if you express interest because something makes you happy, if you don't ask or you don't tell somebody, and that's the big thing. This gentleman that you're talking about, he's done it for himself. Right? He's found things that have made him happy. I think there's a lot of guys out there, a lot of girls out there in this industry who don't realize that they can ask. If they ask genuinely and professionally and politely, not what the fuck are you gonna do for me now, but hey, I really like working on engines. Do you think I could do the engine training? Or do you think I can go get my ASE in engines? Or do you think I can do some engine training down in Missouri? Or do you think I can work on all the engines that come in the door? Because they make me happy. I don't think right now, if you talk to any leader of any service business across the country of the United States, Canada, Mexico, Australia, across the board, if you go to a service manager and say, hey, I want to do all of these, can you get me the training so that I can do all of these really well and make you lots of money? I don't think any one of them is going to turn you down, especially right now, if that's what makes you happy. But you have to ask. I think that's our responsibility as mechanics, to make sure that every one of us knows that if something makes you happy doing what you do, ask to do more.
Yeah.
Do you agree? Yeah. Okay. Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's an awesome story.
And I guess, I think I can remember things being pretty easy like that a while back. I think what happens with like the past few years, I think a lot of us have gotten away with that. It's like it's a rat race every day to stay as caught up as possible. So I think that's probably a little bit to do with it too. You know, on our end and management end, it's easy to forget. I mean, it's easy to just start looking over those things because we all got so much on our plate in this industry. We're all slammed. Anyone who's any decent in this industry, whether it be just a technician or a shop, they're booked at least a week out.
And I think it doesn't even require. I think you can remove the decent part of it. I think there's shops everywhere that are so overwhelmed because they're short on staff. Because technicians as a whole were leaving. You could just look at the number of folks that are no longer in this industry that have left. Or you look at the statistics of folks registering, like in Canada, because of the way our apprenticeship program works, they know the number of people that need to register. That they know how many people need to register in order to fulfill the need of open jobs. And in Canada, and this is, I'm going to get the number wrong because it's going back a little bit since I read the article, but it's something like there's 21,000 registrations required in Canada for mechanics per year, give or take. That's how many are required. And I think the last reported year that I remember looking at is like 2019. I think 10% registered.
That's incredible. I'm not familiar with that. That's new to me. I didn't know Canada was.
We are in Canada. In order to be a technician in Canada, call yourself a technician in Canada, you actually have to be a licensed technician in Canada. We have a certificate. We have a certificate program where you get signed as an apprentice. You work a period of time. I think it's 8,000 hours. You have to work in a registered shop. So the shop has to be registered. You have to be registered as an apprentice. There are a couple of different ways that you can do the schooling, but there's a school requirement that you have to fulfill and pass. Time requirement that you have to fulfill. There is a booklet that you have to fill out with the shop or shops that you have been working at, and that needs to be filled out by an authority of the shop, whether it's a foreman, a licensed technician, or the service manager to say, yes, you have completed these tasks. And I think there's roughly 300 tasks that you have to fill out. They range from being able to change a light bulb to overhauling an engine, and it has to be signed up, and it has to be signed off on. And once you complete those, your hours, the book, and the school all successfully, you then write an exam We shorten it to CFQ, but it's Certificate of Qualification. And we have these for just about every trade in Canada. But as a mechanic, especially an automotive mechanic, you're AST, Automotive Service Technician. In order to get your license, you have to pass that exam with 70%. If you pass it with 90, you're a Red Seal technician like I am, which means that I can be a practicing technician across Canada, not just Ontario. So going back to that previous statement, 21,000 is the number of registrations they require to fulfill the need for technicians in Canada. 10% in 2019 registered.
I wonder what, and that's 2019.
Yeah. So that is, 90% less than the need is what is registered. And that doesn't quantify the number of people who passed, because the number gets even more awful when you look at the number of people who complete the qualification, because you get people who register and then never get their CFQ, which is even less. So there's lots of Bobs, Larrys, and Joes out there that have started who call themselves a mechanic, who registered, but they're now turning a wrench in their backyard without a license, without insurance, without safety, without any of those things. They're calling themselves a mechanic, and maybe they're working at a grocery store full time, or maybe they're working at McDonald's full time because they don't like flat rate, or they don't like the environment that they're in. They don't like being screamed at by their bay mate saying, "Hey, what the fuck are you doing?" There's a whole lot of things out there, reasons why people leave. But in 1955 and 1960, there wasn't that many people saying, "No, I don't want to be a mechanic," because most of them had to go through shop class. They had to learn how to change oil. They had to learn how to change a tire. They had to learn all those basic bits in high school, US and Canada. And that phased out a while back, because I know there's a high school locally that still has they're one of the few that still has an auto shop of some description, but it's mostly body work in there now, not mechanic work. So there's some difficulties in there, and we've got a lot of things to change. One of the big things is perspective. When the public looks at us as greasy, grimy, greedy people who don't have any education, who just cuss a lot and don't do much and charge them a lot of money, we need to change that profession. We need to change that perception with our professionalism. Now, is there always going to be an aspect of cussing in the shop? Yeah, I don't think that's ever going to change. We are who we are, but it doesn't mean that we can't communicate more effectively. That doesn't mean that we can't be more empathetic to those around us. That doesn't mean that we can't be more respectful and inclusive of everybody that comes through the door, customer or coworker alike. It doesn't mean that we can't learn to communicate more effectively and more proactively, and all of the different ways that we can learn to be better as an industry, as more specifically as a trade, I think we need to do.
Now, what do you think it's going to take for a lot of that to set forward? Because we still talk about technician shortage, but we're not really seeing a whole lot being done about it.
And everybody's got an idea for it, right?
Yeah. But it's in my opinion, this is what I tell people is, until we have every auto shop, truck repair shop, whatever it is, has pieces of equipment, vehicles, whatever, laying out on the street, people are complaining about it. I don't think there's going to be a whole lot happening. That's just my opinion.
I think fundamentally, and I made a comment about this a couple of months back, actually a couple of years back, if you go into real details, I don't think, and like I just brought up the statistic, 10% of registrations, we don't have a technician problem. We have an apprentice problem. We have to start at the source. The only way that we're going to get more people in this industry, you're not going to convert people that are our age. You're not going to convert 30 plus. You're not going to tell a 45-year-old, say, "Hey, you want to come make some money? You want to start as an apprentice at 45 at $18 an hour?" No one is going to say yes to that. They're not even going to say yes at $35 an hour. You tell a 45-year-old that, "Hey, come work your balls off, bleed, sweat, work in some of the worst environments possible, and we'll start you at $35 an hour." They're still going to say no. So I don't think there's any amount of money that you're going to convert and get technicians back in the trade. Where you need to start is literally at the start. You need to start in schools. You need to get back into schools, or if nothing else, you need to be in the schools preaching from the highest mountain that this is a worthwhile trade to be in. And then you need to back that up with good processes, good culture, good pay, good training, and be upwardly mobile. There's no reason why you can't start as an apprentice, get your license, specialize, and by the time you're 30, so high school to 30, there's no reason why you can't be making $100,000 a year salary at 30 years old as a technician. No reason. Today, there's no reason. But there's lots out there that aren't. They've been in this industry for 10 plus years, licensed, qualified, ASE certified, that aren't making 100 grand. That's stupid. And the world can see that. The world can see that. So the last thing that a parent is going to tell their 15-year-old that says, I really want to be a mechanic, they're going to say, are you crazy? It's not a good job. You're going to sweat. You're going to bleed. You're going to cry. It's not a great work environment. You're going to get dirty. You're going to get grease everywhere. And you're not going to make 100 grand by the time you're 30? Go to university.
Yeah, that's where it all started.
Bingo.
We had, I'm sure there was, especially the baby boomers, as they were getting at least halfway through their careers and start having kids, tell them, don't get in this trade. It's not worth it. Go to college. Get a desk job. Get paid to rip people off.
The fundamental, and there's lots of mechanics out there that will argue that a mechanic starts making money day one. You're right. Mm-hmm. The college graduate or the university graduate is going to come out after 4 years with $60,000 to $100,000 in debt. Well, guess what? So's the technician. They're going to have $50,000 to $100,000 worth of tools by the time they're 5 years in the trade. Boxes, tools, diagnostic, especially if they're an independent, especially if they're in an independent shop. Not so much if they're in a dealer, because specialized equipment in the shop, special service tools supplied by the manufacturer and by the shop. It is what it is. But if you're going to be a tech for a long time, you're going to have $100,000 tools by the time you're 10 years in the trade. So where's the difference? By the time somebody's got a university degree and they're 30, they should be able to, in theory, make $100,000 a year, if they're ambitious at least. If you're ambitious and a tech in this industry by the time you're 30 and you're not making 100 grand a year, and we have to continuously get education. We have to continuously buy more tools. We are continuously subjected to some of the worst environments possible. We should be making 100 grand a year. So we need to make that happen. It doesn't necessarily need to be 100 grand. It can be 80 grand, it can be 70 grand, but a guaranteed path of success that we need to make sure that the industry actually is, so that parents can tell their children that it's a good profession to be in, so that when they're 15 and they want to be a mechanic instead of go to university at 16, they come to us. Yeah. That has to start yesterday, and that's what we can do. I think trying to preach to trying to get technicians back into the trade or converting people from what they're doing every day to a technician, I think is a viable option, but it's not the best option. Shouldn't be a priority.
Yeah, it's especially it depends on what they're doing, but it kind of goes back to what we were saying earlier. It might be 10 times easier. It's what's going to be worth going back to being a technician for $5 more an hour, and then take on honest.
You can't afford tools at $5 an hour extra.
Yeah.
So anyway, okay. Well, I think that's a wrap. Great chat.